This series today, we're kicking off a brand new series. It's called Relationship Rules, and I'm gonna tell you up front. If you're here and not a follower of Jesus, for the next few minutes, I'll say this. Part of what we're gonna talk about is gonna feel very practical for you. If you're here and you are a follower of Jesus, part of what I'm gonna say, you have heard things like this in the beginning. But we're about to go to like the deep end of the pool on a concept that I think most of us have heard before, or at least processed before. And so over the course of this series, we're gonna have four sort of standalone talks that apply to all of your relationships. And this one specifically, I think, is the foundation of all of them. Now, I was thinking about this week. For me, you probably know this already. We just don't think about it a ton. But you live in one of the most, how would I say this, noisiest, loud, how would I say this, lots of the words time in history, right? I put in my eyes and says, we live in the most verbally saturated culture in human history. You are bombarded with this. And here's how you know you are. You ready? Because many of you, when you wake up, be honest about it. How many of you, when you wake up, one of the first things you do is pick up your phone? Does anybody do that? Be honest, I do too. Yeah. Yeah. And then what do? You look at all the notifications that you missed from 2 a.m. to 7 a.m., which are none. You know what I mean? But just in case, you know what I mean? You pick it up, and then you immediately go into social media, you're going to TikTok, or you're checking your email, all that kind of stuff. You are bombarded from this from the moment that you get up until you go to bed, right? We are bombarded with this. Now, you think about this. You get texts, DMs, comments, mail, Discord. Remember Discord people? Anybody on Discord? Yeah, all the guys group, because I'm learning. Anyway, you got Slack, which nobody likes, phone call, email. I think they'll come at you in all of the different ways, right? And this is just how you communicate with your spouse. Then you have friends, you know what I mean? Like, that was a joke. Right? You got all of these ways that you communicate with people. And right now, right, in our culture, you know this, we talk to each other more than any other point, right? Any other point in human history. We talk more, right? We post more, and we react more than we ever have before. And at the exact same time that we're doing all of these things, many of us find ourselves relationally fragile, right? There is like a fragility to this where you, how do I say this well? Statistically speaking, my generation in particular is the most stressed, the most struggling with mental health, right? You have all this information, you're bombarded with constant information. And when you are participating in it, you're receiving it, you're a part of all of these things, and it's doing something to us. Now, I will tell you up front, the end of this talk is not to throw away your iPhone. I got a new one 2 weeks ago, right? So it's not that, right? It's not that. But at the end of this, what I would say is because we communicate so much, right? The weight of our communication matters so much, right? In fact, if you were to look at relationship stuff that we could talk about all over the place, whether it be with your spouse, whether it be with friends, your coworkers, your boss, however you look at this, it almost always comes back to some form of communicating with people. Almost always. Now, I told you this before. Again, I played baseball growing up. I loved baseball. I started playing really, really young, and then I grew faster than most people my age. So I've been like this size outside of this thing for about, I don't know, since I was about 7th grade. I've been 6'1" since about then, which makes for a really good pitcher. And so when I was in 8th grade, I got the opportunity to play varsity baseball. I just wanted to brag. That's the whole point of this story. Anyway, and I was playing for my team, and people would come to the games, and we started playing one of the best teams in the country in the South, and so we were playing, and I got to pitch the first game. Now, one of these things that was fascinating for me is I'm very driven, I'm very like all the pressure in these moments, and my mom would come see me play, and she was sitting in the bleachers. And you guys ever seen these things where like you would bring your seat to attach to the bleacher? You know what I'm talking about? It was like a padded seat, and my face was on it. So my mom had like my face on the seat. Yeah, that's South Carolina. Heck yeah. Anyway, so there's a little bit of that. And so if you can picture this, I mean, there's a lot of people in the seats. And I had all this pressure, and I was pitching. And it was the second inning. I'll never forget. I had a great first inning. Second inning, I walked somebody. And then the next pitch, first pitch of the next at bat, I threw a ball that was close, but it missed by just a little bit. Now, I'm going to say right up front, this is descriptive, not prescriptive of what you should do. In that moment, I yelled the worst word that I had ever heard in my life. And I didn't just say it under my breath. I said it as loud as I could. And so as you can imagine this, I threw it. I said that word that you just thought of. And the entire stadium goes completely silent. Because you don't see a lot of 12, 13-year-olds saying that aggressively at all, especially in South Carolina. And when I did, the entire place went silent, and except for my mom, who just went, huh. That was her response. That's a true story. She went, huh. And I'll never forget, you know this, I thought about this. It happened so fast. I didn't even say that very often back then. But I would say, like, there was a part of this where I go, it happened so fast, I just said it quickly. And I remember all of the sort of feeling that I had of shame, all this kind of stuff. And then I had to give the ball back and I had to pitch, and then slowly, like, the sound came up. But you know this, when you could feel your parents just looking at you? Like, you know what I mean? I could feel her. Struck out the next 3 guys, but I could feel that. And I thought about this after the game. She came up to me. And I think this is just incredible parenting on her end. We got into our, like, Astrovan. Do you guys remember the Astrovans back in the day? Like Rick Moranis? We had that. I swear, we could have gone into space in that thing. And I got in the car, and here's what she said. And it was so good. She didn't talk about the word. What she said was, she goes, hey, what's going on in you that came out of you just then? Now, she already knew. I knew. You know what I mean? And I remember thinking about this. I was like, the words that we say, whether it's like those moments that get, you know, ampy or whatever, the angry moments, the moments where you try to manipulate things, the moments where you're grasping for control, it all comes from somewhere, right? Where I grew up in the South, people like wash your mouth out with soap. Did that ever happen to anybody else in the room? Yeah. I got that over dang it, right? Because my mom looked at me and she goes, because it's not about the word, it's about what's in your heart. And I was like, okay, yes, ma'am. You know, happened one time, never did that again, except for when I was pitching. Anyway, so there was that, right? Now, I'll tell you this, and this is what's interesting about that. That's a funny, silly, and very true story of those of us who are adults in the room. That there are things that come out of you that you're like, where did that come from? And you know that it comes from somewhere, right? And in the workplace, in your marriage, the vast majority of the things that we talk about are how to, like, sort of modify your behavior so that you don't say things that hurt people. But I would say yes, and you should do that. But Scripture talks about this at such a much deeper level than that, right? I put it in my notes to say it this way, that our words ultimately shape the emotional climate of all of our relationships. Pick any one of them, right? Any one of your relationships. Your words, your tone, your approach, it shapes all of it. Shapes all of it. Right? I put it in here, I said this way too, that you currently live within the relational reality that your words and the words of others have built. So if you are dissatisfied with a relationship, it's not just how you act. For most people, it's what they say and how they say it. That your marriage is a reflection of that. Your marriage is a reflection of the words that you say and how you say it. Now, you know this too, I can say this. There's a version of picking that you're in love and you pick at each other and it's kind of fun. But then there's a version, you ever been around people that they pick at each other, and when they pick at each other, you feel a little bit clenched, like a little bit like, oh, that's not it. You know what I mean? Where it's like, it's just the little tearing down. And you're like, and you feel it culturally. You feel it culturally when you're around them. It's like, what is that thing? Well, you know what that is. That is 1,000 little decisions that have eroded the intimacy of a marriage because it was cutting. Right? You know this. You see this when it comes to your influence. A leader that you know, somebody at work, they can say that one thing, and all of a sudden you just lose so much respect or influence with that person, right? Or 1,000 little paper cuts of the words that are said or the tone that it's said in. You ever been around? I'll say this way. You ever been around somebody and you feel a little bit less than when you're gone? Like, what is that? And you can't even, like, it's not even just what they said. It's how they said it. It does something to you. And so what we're going to do for the next few minutes is this. If you're here and you're a follower of Jesus, this is one of the things that Jesus, I think, teaches the most bluntly on of all the things that he teaches. And then there's one verse in Proverbs. So we're going to take one verse and then 3 verses of what Jesus says and take a deep dive. There's one verse in Proverbs that lays the entire foundation for all of the language and the tone that we look at, right? So we're gonna be looking at Proverbs. This is chapter 18, verse 21. We're literally gonna look at this one verse for a few minutes. Here's what it says. It says, death and life are in the power of the tongue, and those who love it will eat its fruits. Now, I'll say this, I grew up around Proverbs. I used to read Proverbs, like there's 31 of them, so it's kind of a month, so I'd read that pretty consistently. I'd come across this, and this is one of those things where you read it, and I read it, and you read it in church, and you go, like, you just know that this is true. And there are certain parts of this you go, well, I just know that. You just kind of bypass through it because you know that your words matter. But this is not what that verse is saying. There's actually a depth to this verse that is so much more powerful. In the original Hebrew language, these words and the way that they're situated, specifically death and life, are situated in the Hebrew in a way where it actually matters so much, right? Death comes first and then life. And the way that this is written in the text, which again, I think is so fascinating, is often the writers in these texts would lead with the first one that was dominant and what they were talking about. Meaning this, that when you read this verse, words that cause death go so much further and are so much easier to cling to than words that spring out life. And so what the writer's saying, which again is so fascinating, I think to me, is when he does this, he goes, like, death comes first in this, and then life. Right? I put in my notes that the tongue is often more deadly than life-giving, and that's the easier part. Right? If you know this, which one spreads faster, gossip or encouragement? You know this. Gossip always spreads faster, right? Is it easier, especially online? You look at this again. We have created systems that allow us, right? We've created systems that allow us to take information and take words and spread them so fast and so broadly and so quickly. Which one spreads faster? Almost always the bad news. You know this, almost always the bad news. There's something about this where the negative goes faster and it goes further for us, right? And then the next part about this, again, it says, death and life are in the power of the tongue. Words don't always produce instant consequences, but they do produce eventual consequences in every single one of your relationships, right? Every single one of them, which means the small things that you say, the big things that you say, it always produces a consequence of some sort. The question is, which direction is it sending you? Now, can I do this real fast? Because I know me, and I imagine I know you pretty well on this too. Can I just say this? This is the part where I would check out if I was you, right? Because you go, here's what you would know. That you're already pretty good at this. You're already pretty good at not saying stupid things that much. You've learned that you can't look at your spouse and say, thank you so much for sharing that, but my therapist disagrees with you. You know you can't say that, You know, I thought it was good too. Yeah. You know that you can't say things to your boss. You've managed that. Except for the little things, right? The little things that slip out when you're stressed. I didn't know what sensory overload was until we had toddlers. Do you know what I mean? And then you have a toddler that won't let go of you. And you feel sensory overload and you managed it all day. And then something comes out of you what was that? And you know what it was. It was Satan. I'm just kidding. Something comes out of you that's what was that? It comes out of you you know this. It comes out when you're stressed. You come home and you've had a rough day at work. And when you come home, that rough day at work, your family gets the version of you that has stopped being managed. They get the more raw version, at least for the first 30 minutes that you're home. And when that happens, come on, you know this, what happens, right? It comes out. So I would say this. The minute that you and I in this, and I would do the same thing, start to check out of this part of it. Let me just tell you this. I want you to think the worst version of you and how often that actually comes out in the sarcastic, in the cutting, in the little things that you say that erode the things that you most want. Now, there's this other phrase that gets brought up that's attributed to this verse that's in the rabbinic tradition. And the language here that they would use is evil speech. When I think about evil speech, again, I don't love horror movies. And it's not because I don't think they're entertaining. I don't love horror movies because most of the time horror movies are scary because they're jump scared, but the real scary stuff isn't the jump scares. It's the slight erosion of what we're supposed to do and where we're supposed to go. And this is in this rabbinic tradition that talks about this verse in particular. It's the evil speech is a part of this. The assumption is that there are things that you can say that are wildly true, but degrades the humanity in front of the person or of the person that you're giving it to. And when that happens, and I'm going to say this, when that happens, it's still deeply evil. I grew up, and again, my personality is wired this way. If it's true, I feel like I should be able to say it, but you also know this because, you got married too. Just because it's true doesn't mean that you should always say it, or certainly not in a way. Same thing as gossip. You know what I mean? You can say something true and spread it. And James, the brother of Jesus, would talk about how it would be start a small spark and burn down the whole forest. Small thing that might even be true and good. And in this tradition, they would say that is evil. That does something to the person. It does something to the human. And then I think that's even probably more so for many of us This idea that even the things that you tell yourself, the conversation that doesn't end in your mind about you, the conversation about your insecurities or where you lack or what you're not good at, or, God must have messed up in this particular area, or like any of those kinds of things that focus on you, that internal dialogue can sometimes be the most evil speech that we engage in, because you manage your conversation with your boss so much better than you manage your conversation with you. And it does something. It slowly and over time consistently erodes even the view you have of yourself. Now, this isn't just biblical, though it is biblical. We find this in like psychological and, scientific studies as well. And you've seen most of this. This is not going to be new to most of you, but you've seen this, where we say it this way, like this verse plays itself out in the repeated verbal framing. It rewires your perception of yourself in the world. It also rewires your perception of people, which is part of the reason that gossip is so devastating, because you know this, if it's you that's being gossiped about, you never got the opportunity to say the other side of the thing. And someone heard the thing, or somebody engaged with the thing about you, and it changed their perception of you, and you had no control over it, right? This is true about yourself. Come on, you know this. That the things that you think about yourself almost wire and rewire consistently the way you view you. And that matters, right? Say it this way, right? Repeated verbal framing, it rewires your perception. Repeated speech, it will shape your belief about yourself and the world. Repeated belief shapes perception. Repeated perception shapes behavior. Repeated patterns reinforce the neural wiring that is inside of you. And you, come on, don't miss this. Scientifically, you continue to shape your brain in the ways that you think about it by creating the pathways that you consistently tell yourself about you, others, and the world. Which means if you have a bad boss, he may be a bad boss. And also, when you convince yourself that they're a bad boss, they will always be a bad boss to you. It's true in marriage, you know this. He always, she never. All of those lines, come on, you know this, always. It does something to your brain to reinforce what you already see over and over and over and over and over again. Now, when you look at this passage, and again, I think it's so powerful, this one little proverb, this one verse. When you look at this, and when you look in just a second at what Jesus teaches, we could really say it this way, that if death and life are in the power of your tongue or the words that you say, then your spiritual maturity is revealed oftentimes in your speech, in the way that you say things, in your tone, the way that you approach it. In fact, we could do it this way. This would be fun. Now, we won't do this, but it would be fun if we just brought up your spouse. They get a microphone, and they had to be honest. What's the movie where they couldn't lie? What's that movie? Well, that one too, yes. I do love me some Jim Carrey. What's the other one with Ricky Gervais? Is it Ricky Gervais? What's it called? The Invention of Lie. Yeah, either one of these, where you just can't lie. If we brought up whoever it was, and they had to talk about you, and they could not lie. They had to tell the truth, right? They had to tell the truth. If we were to look at this, what would their view of your spiritual maturity be? Strictly based off of their experience of you and the reality of the things that you say. What would your boss say? What would your worst enemy say? What would the person that you don't like at all say about that for you? What would your close friends say about the things you think? Here's another one. This is always fun, and I won't go too hard on this because I have some of these text threads too. But what would your text thread about memes say about you? You know what I'm saying? No, that's probably the most offensive thing I'm going to say all day. Isn't that fun? That's the one. Come on, you know this, right? What would it say about your heart if the things that you thought about, the things that came out of you, were made public and fully? And again, you know this. You've seen this because sometimes there's a lot of examples of this right now where things that people thought were private then became public, and you go, oh, that's what your heart is. That's where your heart is. Now, Jesus teaches about this. And when Jesus teaches about this, there's a specific area that he does it. And what he had done, he had just healed somebody. And there's a group of religious leaders who were the Pharisees. They had a lot of rules, and they were very good at holding the rules. Can we just say they were very good at living in a lot of these ways. They very much were. And so they witness him do this miracle, and what they do is they attribute it to a demonic force rather than God. That's what they do. This is the tension that Jesus is about to speak to. And in the midst of this, Jesus comes after them with such strong language that at the time, like, you wouldn't use this. Like, it would be like, you're cutting this as deep as you can. So Jesus really goes after what they're saying, and he does it within this context, right? And here's what he says, right? We'll go on. This is Matthew chapter 12. So Jesus says this. He says, either make the tree good and its fruit good, or make the tree bad and its fruit bad. For the tree is known by its fruit. And specifically when it comes to our words, right? It's like, well, how do we know? There's one easy way to know. That what comes out of you is likely true even in your worst moments. That's actually, when you're stressed, that's actually the view. That is the level of spiritual maturity that you likely continue to carry on the inside. And then this is the part, this is one of the, I'm not gonna say he cusses, right? We won't say that. But it's like real strong. Everybody would have gone silent. It wouldn't have been quite probably like my mom in the baseball field, but it's strong language. He says, you brood of vipers, which to this group of people connects all the way back to Genesis to the enemy. He's essentially looking like you're a brood of snakes. And where do we get snakes? Genesis. It's like the one who tempted and ruined humanity. You bunch of them. Your mama. Like, it's a little bit of that, you know? And you can imagine, like everybody, you brood of vipers, right? How can you speak good when now don't miss this, what he said, it's so powerful. How can you speak good when you are evil? Not what you say is evil, no. Jesus, that's not even what he's worried about. When you, inside, are evil. For out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. If you grew up in church, somebody probably told you that verse. All right, your dad set you down, probably told you a version of that. He left out the brood of vipers part though, you know? This is where Jesus goes, no. It's not that you're just saying bad things. This is a blunt part. Again, you see this version of Jesus. This is not the lamb and the pretty, it's not sash Jesus. It's not that, it's just like, you know? I don't know what that was, but you get it. It's where he goes after it. And he goes, no, you're not doing bad things. You are bad. That hurts my feelings. I don't care. Like, he goes for it. And then he says this. He says, so good. The good person out of his good treasure brings forth good, and the evil person out of his evil treasure brings forth evil. Now again, pausing in the text going, the treasure was something that was stored. Not one-offs, not every once in a while. Consistent deposits of treasure are good or bad. I tell you, on the day of judgment, people will, can we say this together? People will give an account. And everybody deletes that text thread. Everybody does, right? You know? Give an account for every careless word they speak. For by your words you will be justified, and by your words you will be condemned. Sleep well, sweetheart, you know? Can you imagine if you're a Pharisee, who does a great job of keeping all of the laws, who knows it better than everybody else, and Jesus, a rabbi who is the Son of God, connects it all the way back to the fall of humanity and says, you are evil. Proverbs is fascinating because it gives the consequences of our words. What Jesus does, and again, I think it's so powerful, he gets to the origin and the root of where it comes from. And can I just tell you, like, really honestly? All right, what you say and your tone matters so much. Doesn't even come close to comparing to what's happening inside of you when you say it. I feel like I'd give so many parenting stories. But I would say one of the things that's so fascinating about my kids that is hard for me is when there's like a big, what do they call it? Big emotions, like that sort of thing. Is that what people say? Like big emotions kind of stuff? I look at the thing, you know, and Emily's so wise. She's just so good. She goes, well, this is happening here, but what's, well, like, I didn't think about any of that. They just smart it off, you know? And there's this whole depth of what's happening on the inside. And most adults that I talk to, if we're really honest, because you have grown and you have gotten better. But more times than not, we've gotten better at managing it than we have about healing the source of all of those things. If you find yourself being a consistently negative person, right, it's not because you don't know how to say things that are positive. There's something in you that needs to be healed. If you're angry, and I can get angry, you know what I mean? I can get angry. Like, if you're angry, it's not the person that messed up your order at Wendy's 3 weeks ago. They didn't put bacon on it. You know, like, it's not their fault. It's you. You know, there's something else going on. When you find yourself having a deep desire to spread negative things about other people, because if you're at your most honest, it makes you feel a little better about you. It's not about the words. It's about what's happening deeper inside of you, right? Find yourself in your marriage, and you know this. You've been married long enough to know this. Finding all the little, all the little cutting ways to cut them down, to do it publicly in front of other people. That's you internally. The source needs healing, not just the words, right? But I'm going to say it this way, right? Words we say will reveal your heart. They will ultimately reinforce what's happening in your heart. It determines your relational direction, and it serves, notice this, per Jesus, as the final evidence of the transformative work that Jesus is doing in your life. And it's true about your internal dialogue too. It's easy to talk about with everybody else, but like your relationship with yourself, the things that you say to you, the way you hold yourself accountable, the way you talk about your life, the way you see the world, all of that is connected to you. Now, I heard this phrase, and I didn't like it for a long time. It just felt kind of like, not just cheesy, I mean, maybe a little bit, but just like, I don't know, it didn't feel like super clear. And then somebody tagged like a statement/question to it, and then it just felt like it locked in for me. The phrase that you've heard before is that worlds create, that's not true. Worlds don't create worlds. Words do, though. Words create worlds, right? Right. But then the question, Grant Veneman, ladies and gentlemen, my man. So you would. That's why you ask somebody to do Pro Presenter for you every single Sunday. You know what I mean? I think he's missed two, but we won't talk about that. All right. Words create worlds, right? But here's the question where the puzzle locked in for me. It's what interior and exterior world are you building with what you say to you and what you say about other people? Now, I'll tell you what I'm tempted to do. This is what I was tempted to do. I wanted to just put a period here and just like, be done, go, and change your heart, right? But I was like, how do I give you some really practical ways to evaluate your heart and your mind? So here's a couple around this, and we'll wrap up in a second. The first thing is this. I want you to pay attention to your identity language, right? The best way I knew how to say this, and this is the most freeing thing that I've been taught on this, is that your identity and the ways that you frame your conversations about other people when it comes to their identity, that matters so much, right? So when it's positive and encouragement, speak to the identity, right? Call people up. Call people to their potential. Call people to the things that you see in them. If it's negative, you focus on the behavior, right? In marriage, this will just be better for you. In your friendships, it's just better for you. As a leader, in one-on-ones, it's better for you. You don't focus on the identity when it's negative. You focus on the behavior, and then vice versa. But I want to say this, like, to you personally, right? I'm always da-da-da-da-da, or I never da-da-da-da-da, I da-da-da-da, like whatever that is. I've told you this story so many times, I feel like it's kind of gets old, but I had my sixth grade, I was doing super well in math, and then I had this one moment with a teacher who probably doesn't even remember this, who made me feel so stupid with the things they said, and I developed an internal narrative that I'm not good at this thing, right? But it was never like I haven't learned it. It was that I'm just not good at it. I still don't like to go in Excel spreadsheets, right? almost 40. You know what I'm saying? Like, I feel like I should have conquered that by now. There's something about that where I feel like the internal identity narratives about you and about others matter so much. The other one is this, and I wish I could give like the best, I'm trying to figure out how to say this well. You have to refuse contempt, and then you have to audit, I want to audit my tone, right? Refusing contempt is this, and this is just practically, the data shows that in marriages, when one of the partners shows contempt for the other one, the percentage of divorce skyrockets. It's the eye roll. It's the internal thing that happens in the narrative before you're just kind of done with it. Like all that, it's all of that. And I'll just tell you this, ready? You can control that. You just have to choose to. You have to reframe it. You have to audit your tone, right? I apologize in our household more for my tone than my words. And it's not because I'm so good with words, it's that sometimes I'm so bad with my tone. Auditing your tone matters so much, right? This is free. This is fun. I asked a really, really phenomenal leader one time. I was like, sometimes you say things and it's not cutting. It's super clear. It's super truthful. It helps the individual. But man, if I said it, man, it would not go that well. How do you say it that well? He goes, I just smile. I was like, that feels unhelpful. You know what I mean? And then I tried it. I was like, maybe that's the reason he's where he is. You know what I mean? Like there's a little bit of that. Come on, you know this. And it's not that you just say all the bad things and smile, but it's like, you know this. Your tone matters so much. You disagree with somebody and they come at you. What's your next response? Come at them. But you disagree with somebody who you feel like and know like they care about you, right? And you audit and pay attention to what you're saying. Come on, it changes the influence in all the directions. And then can I pause for a second? And I'm gonna talk politics for a second, then come back, so we'll just all butt clench together. It'll be great. Can I just say this? I'm gonna tell you who's gonna figure this out one day. Somebody's gonna figure this out. And I hope we figure it out locally, and then I hope it goes further than that, right? I hope we figure it out as a church, and then we go with it. I'm just gonna tell you that. You can make a point all day long. Made a point, I said it so well, and it's the gotcha. You know what I'm talking about? You ever done the gotcha thing? Where you know that it's like you hit a half-court shot at the end of the game, and you walk out like, what's up? Like LeBron it, whatever. And here's what happens, you ready? Everyone who agrees with you goes, oh, that was so good. And those who don't put up both birds and walk away, They do. Can I just tell you something? You should be as passionate about whatever you're passionate about as you're passionate about it. But just know that. But when you take that posture, it's like you're handing your influence over to the person you disagree with and say, I don't care. Don't care. Now, you know this in almost every other arena. You know this in parenting. You know this in your friendships. You know this with your spouse. Come on, you know this. In your wisest days, you think about what you say to your spouse. And you think about the context and the influence and all of those things. You think about that. You think about this with your kids when you're doing it well. I'm just going to tell you, when you do the, and then all your likes and comments, or everybody agrees with you, that's the algorithm feeding them to everybody who's going to like it, right? But when you want to make change, when you want to do something that matters, you audit your tone, you refuse contempt, you see the human in front of you, and you go, okay, I want this to move. I want to move the needle on that thing. And it's called leadership. All right, number 3, consistently audit my self-talk. Right, I'm gonna tell you this. Can I just be like really blunt? I said this over and over and over again in the thing. Your self-talk will influence everything else that you do. Everything else that you do, right? And if your self-talk leads you to a place where internally you're just like dying on the inside, or you're eroding on the inside. Let me just tell you, and I mean this, you will get to the end of your life and not understand why you're unhappy, why the relational environment that you created is not joyful. And it will be because you and others didn't pay attention to their words. All right, I'm gonna say 2 things and then we're gonna wrap up. And then we're in kind of deep part of some of this stuff. When you hear something like this, there's typically 3 responses that I would have that I think most people have, and that's this. You feel shame around what you've done or what you said. Mine often is I'm going to try harder to do more of the right thing, or I'm going to get defensive and say, that's for somebody else. I'm so glad he preached that to them. Let me text them your sermon later, whatever that is, right? Yeah. But if you walk away from today and go, I just need to manage my speaking more, you missed it, right? Because your heart, by the language that you use and the ways that you approach it, is protecting something in you that I said earlier that needs healing. I said your words are honest about what your heart is producing. It is. So what is your heart protecting? What is it? Now, for all the guys in the room who don't like the word heart, totally get it. What is your brain? I don't know. Your being? I don't know. Whatever that is. What is that thing protecting in you that is vulnerable to the point that it causes you to do those things? If your tone is sharp, like what are you afraid of losing in those moments, right? If you're the person who's constantly negative and critiquing, right? What insecurity is driving that thing? If your self-talk is consistently brutal, right? Whose voice are you living under that you picked up along the way that is yelling somewhere in your heart? If you gossip, come on, what belonging do you wish that you had? What is that thing? And until you do that work, you may manage it better, but you will not heal. I put it in my notes that Jesus wants to heal the source, not just your behavior. He wants to heal the source, not just your behavior, right? And for those of us who are followers of Jesus, I said this last week, this was a lot of the message last week, but that you don't have to protect what Jesus has already healed in you. You have to accept what he's already done for you and live from that, not for it, right? And the last thing, this is where we're going to end our time, and that's this. That internally and externally, I want you to speak from the transformed heart that Jesus gives us. This is what I mean by that. And I mean this as lovingly, as kind as I could say. That the evil speech thing that we talked about earlier, to yourself or to others, the death and the life thing, right? That is all tethered to the source of all of it. That is inside of you. And Jesus wants to heal that thing. He doesn't want to make you better. It's not just making you better. It's not about being just more disciplined. You're already disciplined. It's not just being a better person. You're already pretty good. You're doing all right. As he wants to surgically get all the way through the crap, straight to your heart, and provide healing to that thing that needs healing. And some of you need to hear this, and this is where we're going to end. He does do that. Some of you believe in a Jesus like the get out of hell free card thing, or the religious things that makes you a better person. All of those are good. But Jesus still does the miraculous thing in people. And he still heals the things that feel like they can't be healed. Let me pray for us. Father, thank you so much for these passages that were written so long ago, the words that we find in Proverbs that were written and passed on and passed on and passed on, the wisdom of people that come before us and interacting with each other, but also with you. And most of us move so fast. Most of us, including myself, we're so sensory overloaded, and we're kind of stressed, and there's a lot going on, or there's a lot that we've picked up over the years, or there's a lot happening on the inside, and many of us have been so good at managing it. But God, you're not wanting us to just feel tired of managing these things and continue to modify behaviors to get 1% better in that way. God, you want to go all the way to the source of all of it and bring healing. And God, you do that. And for the person in the room who doesn't know if you do that, I just pray that you would remind them that you do that. That you would show them that you do that. For the person in the room who's not a follower of you yet, and they go like, I wish this were fixed, but it's not fixed. Maybe this is the thing that they try. as they explore their faith. Of just like, if you're up there, can you help heal this thing? And if they lean into you and do that. For every person in the room who's been wounded because of the words of other people, and they've been wounded at a deep level, God, we just pray that you would heal those pieces too. For those of us in the room who carry identity loops in our mind, I almost feel like they were passed on by people who shouldn't have passed them on. God, I pray that you would put in us what should be there. For the person in the room who's craving the positive thing, but can't figure out how to overcome the negative, I pray they go all the way to the source and you would heal that part too. And God, I pray for us individually and as a church, as people, that we would speak and build life, that we would be known for that we would call other people to the potential that you've placed inside of them, that we would see like with your eyes in every room that we walk into, potential in people, who they are, and call them to those things. And then when it's time to speak the kind of truth that's painful, that we would do it in a way assuming that they are still made in your image and still human. And I pray that you would make us like you in all of those ways. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.